Zooscape by GMT, a small box game about animals that have escaped from the zoo. It could be a horror movie, but the game handles the theme very lightly. In this game, you're trying to capture animals and bring them to the cages, and you score points for doing so, but careful, too many animals of a certain type, more than you can handle, more that you can place in your cages, it's bad and will lose you points at the end of the game. The game comes with a nice deck of cards. Look at the illustrations. They're really nicely done. Really impressive. These watercolor palettes here. Really nice. And as you can see, there are also numbers and card symbols. The number indicates the number of points that the card is worth at the end of the game. The number of cards that you see underneath represents the maximum capacity of your cages for the type of animal. So, at the end of the game, you will score the points for these cards. So, for example, 2 snakes will be worth 8 points, 4 and 4. But if you have more of a kind, then the number of cards for that kind, actually, you don't score those points, and each such card will be a penalty of -1. So, if I have 3 snakes, when the maximum capacity is 2 per snake for the snakes, 3 snakes wouldn't be 12 points, but would be -3, so pretty tricky there. You also have a couple of other special cards that may give you penalties, trigger other effects, but this is the general idea. The cards are shuffled, and then from the deck you will draw 5 groups that will form 5 other decks. And the size of these decks depends on the number of players. The game plays for 3 to 6 players, which is, well, to me, one of the very small minuses of the game. And the minus is that it doesn't play with 2 players. Games that also play with 2 players are simply a little more flexible. I can play them more often. With 3, I just don't play them nearly as often. With 3 players, for example, you will form 5 decks of 8 cards each. With more players, would be 5 decks of more cards, but it's always 5 decks, and the game lasts 5 rounds, so you will use one of these decks each round, and when the decks are over, then you start the final scoring. At the beginning of a round, you draw cards from one of the decks, and you place them in a line without changing the order from which they come out, and you won't be able to see the whole line here, but it doesn't really matter. We'll be able to figure out how the game works anyways. So you form a line more or less like that without changing the order. Now, each player receives a set of 2 cards called first and second, with arrows pointing to different directions. Also, a player will receive these 3 special cards: the clipboard, the manager, and the first and second card. So the player with the manager card will do 2 things after the line of cards has been established. First, that player will place the first and second card somewhere in the line, and suppose I want to place it here, and you slide cards around to make room for the first and second, but you do not change the order. Then the player also takes the clipboard card and again places it somewhere in the line without changing the order of the cards, and suppose that they want to put it there. Then all players will commit one of their cards. They secretly put one down on the table, and when everybody is done with their selection, they all reveal it. And then, depending on which sections have been chosen by the players, you will assign cards to different players. So, if a section has not been chosen by anybody, suppose in this game everybody was choosing first and nobody chose second, you take the cards in the section that has not been chosen, and you place those cards under the clipboard. If a section has been chosen only by one player, but he chose a section, but only one player chose the other section, then the cards in that section go to the only player that selected it. But if you have multiple players fighting for the same section, then that section needs to be divided again, and you repeat the procedure. You repeat the procedure until all players have acquired cards, or players cannot acquire cards, in which case the players that cannot acquire cards get a fish card. They're all the same, and it's just a consolation prize. You simply continue like this. If the clipboard is not assigned in a turn because of the way cards have been split, then it simply remains, well, it goes to the next round together with the cards that are under it, and it's simply placed in play next time, and the cards that are under the clipboard will go to the player that takes a clipboard card. It's as simple as that. Repeat this 5 times, forming a line, split it somewhere, players will bid, and then depending on what they commit to take, they'll get groups of cards, maybe a single card or a fish. As simple as that. And at the end of the game, again, players will score points, and as we said, they'll score the individual value of the cards that they have in their stack, in the victory point stack, but only for animals that do not exceed the cage value. For those animals, they lose a point for each card, ignoring the value printed on the card. Simple as that. This is Zooscape. It really reminds me of the idea, well, a kid cuts the cake and then somebody else chooses first to ensure that the cutting, the splitting of the cake was fair. Here, well, everybody chooses at the same time, but the principle remains the same. And clearly, cutting the cake, placing the first and second card is a very big decision. It's pretty much one of the most important decisions in the game. Because the player that makes that decision will try to create sets that, well, will allow him or her to take the sets that they want, and probably getting somebody else stuck with sets that they don't want. So it's a little bit about reading what the opponents have, remembering what they have in their decks, what is it that they may want, what is it that they are not so fond of acquiring. In that sense, you have to play with players that are not too obsessive, because technically there is a perfect knowledge. All cards that players gain have been on the table at some point, and you have seen them. But if somebody gets too stuck into analysis paralysis, I really want to remember how many lions they have, then that person can completely kill the game. But that person, I believe, simply doesn't understand the spirit of the game, which is one of like, well, brave it, go by your guts, go by your feelings, remember what you can remember, count cards if you can without becoming a pain in the neck for everybody. Other than that, it seems to me that probably doesn't want lions. Oops, why did he grab the lions that I left there? Oopsie doopsie, my mistake, or their mistake. Maybe they don't remember how many they have. So, as long as you don't take it too seriously, you don't try to analyze it like it's some dry and cold Euro game, then you'll be fine. Then there's a game that can be a lot of fun. It really is entertaining, and I like the fact that it's about grabbing cards, but the danger of too much of a good thing is very much there. So again, certain rounds you will want certain cards, then because oopsie, everybody went not where you expected them, then you end up with more cards than you thought, and then those cards that you want all of a sudden become anathema, and you don't want to see them again. So the situation changes during the game, and this is something that is interesting to me, because I was a little worried that the game was going to be, well, 5 times the same thing. But it's not like that, because your ability to score and what you want to score and not score changes over time. And so you have to keep up with that. And again, if you remember what other players have, all the better. But if you do not obsess about that, even better. It's better if you don't pay attention to that than if you pay attention about it too much. But the game is simple, is intuitive. It's funny that when I read the rule book, which also is a single sheet of paper, they made the game sound more complicated than it is, simply because the game has to cover all possible, like if it happens this, do this, if that happens, that. It has to cover all possible cases, but many of those will not occur very often, if ever, in real life. So in truth, the game is split the cards, assign a group to the only player that committed to that group, and divide groups that are contested, that are desired by more players. As simple as that. So the game is flows very well, flows easily. The art is nice, so it's also a game that's very pleasant to look at. And gameplay, as simple as this, is very entertaining. Definitely can be like a little bit of a filler / extended filler, the game to warm up during a game night. It will have fun moments, and there will be laughters and cheers around the table when, well, things don't go at all like people expected them to go. But that is precisely what also makes the game fun and amusing. And although technically there is very little randomness, well, the cards are shuffled at the beginning, but once they are on the table, then it's all about the decisions that you make. Although there is technically very little randomness, the fact that you don't know what the opponents are doing, and from time to time the opponents will make a mistake, will have a very clear strategy, and they put down the wrong card. That happens to me all the time. It's not like a fictional scenario, it's a memory, and that is very bad in terms of gameplay, but very fun in terms of the social experience that emerges from the game. Overall, Zooscape, simple, light, very good looking, but also very entertaining. Definitely a good game.